Hey up you lot. So I wanted to talk today about some psychedelic stuff. Now I took an odd route into psych. Um, Basically I got into more psychedelic stuff through punk, which is very odd because punk was the antithesis of like all that 60s free love. And Johnny Rotten even had like his Pink Floyd t-shirt with I hate sprayed across it. But there's a lot of like influences that drift across, and as I was in my late teens and really getting interested in the history of the music I loved, it became apparent that there was more to it and more to that 60s influence. I remember I used to go into a bookshop a lot and hang around. This will be in the late 80s, and there was all these guys chatting about the Illuminati and Gnosticism and things I was just learning about in the world. And one of the old rockers that used to go in, he knew I was obsessed with the Damned, still am, and he said, "Oh, if you like the Damned, you ought to check out some Pink Floyd." And I was there in my tartan trousers with my Mohican and my punk uniform, kind of going, "Nah, that's old man music." Little did I know. And the more I looked, the more I saw influences with the. I mean, the first things I saw was more like garagey type stuff. So with the Nas Nomad album by some of the guys from the Damned, there were a lot of covers of like garage classics, and then bands like the Tall Boys that again just picked up these like classic fuzzy garage hits. But yeah, psychedelia kind of drifts in, and when I was kind of really getting into it in the uh, probably in the early 2000s, I started picking up more CD compilations just because I didn't know what I liked, and like a best of psychedelia compilation might point me in the direction of some bands I might dig. One of the ones I did buy, sorry, was this one. The desperately unfairly titled Best and the Rest of British Psychedelia. Now, this CD blew me away, and I didn't know any of the bands on it. It was like when you got like psychedelic comps from that era, it always had like you know the Birds, first edition, like psych belters, but maybe compilations that were put together to appeal to people commercially and not have anything too odd on it. But this one, it had some really strange and sinister songs on it that were brilliant. Now, one thing, this might just be me, and this we're talking about music, so it's my personal opinion, and if you disagree with any of this, that's cool, and if you totally agree with any of this, that's cool. But one thing I love about, mainly it seems to be British psych stuff, is that it's got a dark and sinister undertone to it all. There's something bleak about a lot of it. And even though the actual melody might be up tempo and upbeat, there's undertones maybe vocally of unpleasantness and unhappiness, or yeah, something sinister going on. Now I like horror stuff, sinister stuff, so maybe I just look for that. I don't know, that might just be me. So it turns out that this Best and the Rest of British Psychedelia was a cheap CD reissue of this compilation. And I didn't find out for quite a few years. And when I did start exploring Morgan Blue Town, I was absolutely blown away. So this compilation came out in '88. And Morgan Blue Town was almost like a bit of a flop. a bit of a failed label. Monty Babson owned a studio called Morgan Studios and saw this kind of this trend for more psychedelic type stuff, and basically got people that were around in the Morgan Studios to do stuff and put stuff out, and I'm a huge fan of Morgan Bluetown. I've got quite a lot of the reissues. Now, one thing with a lot of these is that the original ones are stupid expensive, crazy expensive, hundreds and hundreds. So all mine are reissues, and it's just nice to be able to buy these LPs and have a reissue. And it costs me like $15.99, and I know it's in perfect condition, and I'm off. As much as I would love a staggering collection of rare psych, I can't afford it, and I never find them in the wild. It's not the kind of thing that you find in Yorkshire, in charity shops and that. So I thought today I'd have a little look at some of my favourites. I've kind of picked 5 absolute top favourites from Morgan Bluetown. One of which is this. Now, a lot of compilations kind of showcase hits and stuff. This one really does. A lot of the standout tracks for me from like a lot of the Morgan Bluetown albums are on this compilation, and maybe it was that like joy of discovering it and not realising what it was, and just finding a CD compilation of all this obscure psych that was weird and sinister. I just instantly fell in love with this compilation. But I think if you're interested in this weird era of British psychedelia, this is a really good place to start. This is like a corker, and it's got so many of their key songs from key albums. So let's have a look at some actual individual albums. So, Motherlight. Now, this was an odd one. This is one of my all-time favourites. It's by Bobak, Johns and Malone, and it's often like on the Psychedelia CD compilation. The track that's from this is credited to Motherlight, which it's not. That's the name of the album. So it was Will Malone who wrote most of it. Andy Johns and Mike Bobak came out in '69, and an original commands a hugely high price. I think a lot of the Morgan Bluetown releases flopped and ended up remaindered or in bargain bins, and so I guess a lot of it got disposed of. And it's only over the past couple of decades that I think record companies have picked up, people that publish LPs have picked up on it and started to reissue stuff. Obviously, if you've heard of any of these bands, the standout track is House of Many Windows, which essentially is about a dude finding this house of many windows and realises that it's full of sightless children, and that's about it. And it's so up-tempo and such a well-crafted song that almost makes you feel happy musically, but lyrically it's very odd. And that is the standout track on this album. It's the track that's included on that. But it's got such a melancholy to it as well. There's one song called Burning the Weed, which I don't think fits that well. Because everything else on it is fragile and strange. Like I said, this commands a high price for an original pressing, and I think it warrants that. there's something so charming and odd and totally archetypally British about it. A lot of psychedelic stuff that I've listened to as more of a discerning adult, I kind of think that a lot of like American stuff I've heard is that full-on banging psych guitar, and there's a lot going on and it's crazy. A lot of the British stuff seems to be just toned down a little bit with amplified strangeness rather than amplified fuzz guitars. Another one I think is an absolute belter is from 1967. It's Smoke Time by The Smoke. The main song on this one is My Friend Jack, which was released as a single and then banned from a lot of radio airplay because it's very obviously about somebody that's totally drug-addled the majority of the time, and their ability to imbibe certain substances is quite impressive. My Friend Jack is also on the Morgan Bluetown compilation. Now, this one doesn't really have that kind of sinister edge that the Motherlight album has. This is very much pop psych. Mick Rowley, who was the singer, has such a... he can adapt his voice to softness, but also when they're doing more like R&B type stuff, he can really belt it out. It would have been interesting to hear him front something even more rockier, something that he could really wail on. But like with Motherlight, this album was a one-off. It was the only album that Smoke released. And yeah, another absolute corker, but a bit more chilled, a bit more pop psych. Then we've got Holy Grail by Chimera. Now, on the Morgan Bluetown compilation, there's a song called Peru, which I think was my standout favourite track on that compilation. It's... So, basically, Chimera was mainly Lisa Bankoff. She kind of wrote everything. She was an amazing, well, probably, hopefully still is, an amazing vocalist. And she was joined by Francesca Garnett. And those two, between them, their vocal arrangements and range and power and quality just blow me away every time. And again, like I was saying about the Smoke album, the versatility of these two ladies as vocalists is staggering. You get like the album kicks off with almost like a kind of traditional Led Zepp type rock track, which they just power through, but goes in so many different directions to the point where there's gentle folk, and they carry it vocally in every track. This album was recorded during kind of 1967 to 1970, but then wasn't even released. I think it was released in the early 2000s the first time when the master tapes turned up, and it's such a shame because I think this album would have just been a key classic to get of British psych. The band themselves were managed by Pink Floyd's Nick Mason. It was produced by Will Malone from Bobak John's Malone. And some of the people that played on it, there's Rick Wright from Pink Floyd, Bob Weston, who'd end up in Fleetwood Mac, and then a lot of the guitars and bass were provided by Mickey Finn from T-Rex. So there's an amazing rock pedigree on this, and then it's just crowned by like Bankoff and Garnett's stunning vocals. Once again, it goes in sinister directions as well. There's almost like a kind of Wicker Man type vibe to some of it. But yeah, it's always tempered with like they're up and down, so you'll get something full on rock. This is awesome. This is banging, and then they'll drop it down and do something a lot more gentle, but it doesn't feel jarring. It just feels like you've gone on a little journey, like a 40-minute journey that these ladies have taken you on, and they want to tell you about strange things that are happening or that are in their heads. Again, I think personally it's a wonderful and strange and archetypally British, odd, psychedelic journey. It's wonderful. One thing that I do, I mean, I love sitting and listening to records, and music isn't something that happens while I'm doing something else. It is sometimes if I'm working or drawing, there's music on constantly, but I do always make time just to put an LP on and maybe have a cup of tea, but just sit and listen to it properly. And with a lot of these psychedelic records, there's so much going on musically, and with their new and unusual ideas, I think they're some of the most fascinating records to just sit and listen to. So I've picked 5, including the compilation. So the fifth and final one is another super expensive one. Again, this is a reissue, so I haven't got any that would cost me like 700 or 800 quid. I can't afford it. So this is Pussy Plays by Pussy, and this one was one of the most kind of the band. Nobody really knew who they were for an awfully long time. It's just a mix of guys. There was on the Bluetown compilation. There's a track by Fortes Mentum, and there's a couple of guys from that, and a couple of just musicians that answered an ad in Melody Maker to join up. And this is lovely. The first track is a lively belter, kind of bass and organ heavy, up tempo, about having a broken heart and you want your last to come back. So again, it's that like joyous sound, but overall sadness to it. Another standout track, which I think is on the Bluetown compilation, is All of My Life, and that's All of My Life I Have Lost Everything. You know, it's like, it's bleak and unhappy. These guys have since been tracked down and interviewed the heck out of. One thing I think maybe one reason that maybe they didn't step forward at the time and stuff like that was the vocalist Dec Boyce. I don't think he likes this album. In an interview I read with him, he said, and I'm quoting him, so I'm going to read it, "I still don't understand why people think that Pussy Plays is good. It's all over. You get kind of full on, more feel-good type rock, but it's juxtaposed with sadness and a kind of, it's almost like fragile and ephemeral, and then you just get like odd tracks that are just like an instrumental theremin odyssey that's pounding along with just, you can just picture a mad wizard playing a theremin along to this backing track, and it's brilliant and strange, and oddly enough not fueled by illicit substances. Again, in interviews, a lot of these chaps said they weren't interested in mind-bending substances. They'd rather have a cup of tea. Now, how English is that? So again, this was a one-off, and I love that. I love that idea of one amazing, beautiful, perfect album being released, and then that's it. They're forgotten and gone into the mists of time. Obviously, these are all on CD as well. I think they're all on CD. And with the CDs, you do get extra tracks and demos and stuff like that. But I've always just wanted this kind of stuff on LP. That's how I enjoy listening to music. And I don't want to get into the argument of which sounds best, because it's all personal taste, and you can just go round and round and round the houses, can't you? So Morgan Bluetown did get a lot of releases out. I've just picked a handful of my favourites, and then I'm not going to be rattling on for hours and hours and hours. If you look on Google or Discogs, you can find kind of like everything that they put out, and there's some absolutely great stuff. Some stuff that's not available on vinyl, but the bulk of it has been reissued on either vinyl or CD. So if I haven't included your favourites, I kind of just could have kept going for ages if I'd like started talking about Angel Pavement and Orange Bicycle, and it's a brilliant rabbit hole of wonderful British odd psychedelia. So take your own little journey down that rabbit hole and see what you find that speaks to you. So let's have a little look at what Victor's been up to this week. And I would like to thank you guys for watching. And don't get cross at me in the comments. Like I said, I am not an expert in psychedelic stuff. I didn't discover it through a passion for it. I discovered it through punk and new wave and post-punk, and then it developed into a love of this musical art form. So thank you for watching, guys, and I will see you splendid folks in the next video.